Welcome, Traceable designers. Today we're making the Straight-Style single panel valance. This valance is made with a no-sew rod hanging pocket and is hung using a straight or standard metal curtain rod. You can make this as a dual fabric or a single fabric design with fringe on the bottom or trim. You also have table accent design forms in your kit, so check out the table decorating video as well. So today we're making a fall style valance, a dual fabric design with fringe. So you'll need your Straight-Style design form from your Traceable designer kit. We'll begin by sizing our fabric. You can hover the design form over your fabric so you can see the placement. You're going to use two and connect them together. You'll use about a 1-inch section to connect them. So when you're measuring off your fabric on the bottom, you want to make sure you like the placement. Remember, above will be also a second fabric, and then you need room for your rod pocket. To size your fabric, you'll have to measure your completed and hung sized rod from the wall edge to the wall edge for your full length. This is very important because your valance will butt up against the wall on both sides. So I have a 45-inch wide piece of fabric, so I'm just going to use the full piece because I'll need room for cutting. And then I'm measuring my lower section, which is going to be about 11 inches. Remember, there's an overlap, and also I need some room for tracing. So when you fold this whole section in half, it's a little bit more even because you can line up on the sides. So I cut my 11-inch section, and then I need to adjust for the upper section. I'm using the center panel top line, the top edge for the center panel as my placement for my back lining. Everything above that's going to be the rod pocket. So I have a 6-inch section that I'm using for my upper portion, and then I measure above for my rod pocket, giving me a total of 11 inches down. So I've used a folded in half section of fabric. It's just easier. And then just mark off your 11 inches. And then just cut that section out very straight. To adjoin the fabric sections, you'll need them front side out. So you're going to put a 1-inch strip of fusible backing on the front side of the upper section, and then we'll secure the bottom together. So once you've cut a nice straight piece of fusible backing, just fuse that to the front side, following all along the entire length. Following along with the fusible backing in the iron. Don't overheat. You'll have a medium iron dry with no steam. Once that paper has completely cooled, you'll be able to peel it off to expose the glue, and then align your second fabric section over top, or your bottom fabric section, evenly and very straight across the bottom, and then you'll just fuse that section together. This adjoined area will be covered with either fringe or trim or ribbon or whatever you've selected. So if it's a little uneven, that will be the time to straighten that out. So now what we're going to do is measure up for our rod pocket. So remember, we're doing 6 inches above. We're making a 13-inch full length valance. So that is marking off where your fusible backing is going to be positioned, so that you're going to line that along your marks, and then you have to adjust your backing to fit inside of all the edges. You don't want it to extend past any of the edges onto your ironing board, so size that if needed. Always begin in the center and sweep out toward the sides when you're attaching the backing. That pushes everything out nice and even. So just continue with a sweeping motion. Don't hold your iron in one place, otherwise you'll have iron marks, or it may have a melted area that doesn't adhere. So using a sweeping motion, just continue until the backing is completely secured, and then you're going to want to let that get nice and cool, 100%, before you peel the paper off. Try to keep the paper in one large section as you peel it off carefully, and then reserve that paper for when you attach your trim to protect your ironing board. Okay, it's time to attach our lining. So we're going to cut a very straight piece across the top and make sure that the lining extends around all the edges, beyond all the edges of your valance, and then align that lining straight across the top edge of your glue. You want to cover the glue but not be above it, and then just continue fusing until that's 100% secured. Then fold your fabric section in half and pin it. Make sure you line the upper section of the lining together so it's nice and even. You want to make sure everything's very straight before you begin tracing and cutting. Now in this particular case, for the design form sizing, you're going to measure over the size, half the size of your full length. In my case, it's 21 inches for a 42-inch valance. So you'll mark those sections on the right-hand side. I'm marking 21 inches all the way up and down, And that is going to be my placement for my right side of my design form. Now again, I'm making a 13-inch deep or 13.5-inch deep valance. If you'd like to adjust that, you can raise the design form. So I'm aligning along the center panel top edge for my lining, and then I'm simply tracing around where my marks were placed. So you'll start at the top at the rod pocket area, trace down, and then continue completely around your design form, along the bottom and across. Again, if you'd like to shorten your valance, this would be the time to raise it and then retrace the bottom. Once that's traced, you'll slide your design form down to even out your rod pocket. In my case, it's pretty straight, so I don't really need to do anything. But if you did need to straighten that out, all you would do is trace across the top and cut that section off. So you can cut this out any way you'd like. I'm starting at the upper cut side on the outside left edge, and then I'm turning it around with the folded edge toward me. Press down as you're cutting. You want to make sure everything's nice and firm when you push down so it stays super even. Then you can easily and carefully cut around your corner. This is an important part to give the valance the design. So take your time with this and completely cut out your panel. Now we're moving on to the rod pocket. This is a no-sew rod pocket. When you fold your fabric over, you don't want it to overlap your lining. So you leave a little space there and then just iron that down to give it a crease. And then we're going to cut a piece of fusible backing to fit inside without overlapping onto the other fabric or the section between, and without overlapping onto your ironing board. So fuse that down, and then again, once cooled, peel off all the paper. If it sticks a little bit, just remove it. Peel the paper off and then taut. You're going to pull this over the lining area, nice and taut and very straight, and then fuse down your pocket. That takes a little longer just because the fabric's a little bit thicker. You've got a couple of layers there. Okay, we're ready to add our trim and our fringe in my case. So you have to measure off your trim all the way around the entire distance of your valance. Make sure you give yourself extra, and then once you've cut off your trim, you're going to flatten that out. So pull out your paper with the shiny side facing up, and then just flatten out your trim. Get a piece of fusible backing to make the iron-on trim, and just cut long strips of fusible backing to fit the back side of your trim. Position the knobby side or glue side down, and then simply follow along, adhering the fusible backing to the back side of your trim. It's really easier than it looks. Just carry on along until you get that completely secured. If it moves a little bit, you can add more, and then just add a number of strips until you've completely covered the entire length. Let it cool completely, and then peel off the paper to expose the glue, and then you'll be able to fuse that down to your valance. Position the trim over the top edge and then just fold it behind to secure. You're going to hold the edge of the iron. Try not to cover all of the fabric so you don't get burn marks, but this is a little bit of a process, so take your time. The trim does warm up as it moves along, so you'll reposition it as needed and make it nice and straight. Unlike a glue gun, this can be moved and repositioned if needed. So when you start to curve around the edges, you'll see that the trim starts to curve and move, but it isn't secured yet. So that makes it lay nice and even right on the edges. So then keep going over it, holding the edge of the iron over the trim, and then let it cool, or you can reposition it prior to cooling, so you can go back over and look at it and make it absolutely perfect, which adds to the beauty of this design. You really want your trim secured evenly. So you'll hold the iron over top, pressing down, lifting it up, repositioning, and as it cools, it starts to adhere. So just manipulate your valance around until you get it nice and straight. When you go along the straight section on the bottom, warm it up and then pull it a little bit taut, not too much, but just enough to get a nice straight line, and then continue around your corners and double check to make sure they're even on both sides. And then at the end, again, snip that off and fuse that down. Okay, now for the last step, we're going to add our fringe to cover the connection. I'm measuring down. It looks like it's 5 inches. I want to make sure my fabric is 5 inches all the way across. If it's not exact, you have an opportunity to mark it. So you can see here that I have to mark 5 inches to make that straight. And then I can check it across the whole valance, and then you'll just position the top edge of your trim even. So it'll go across the top of your break there and then across your marks. So this is something that you want to make sure is nice and straight because it will make a big difference in the end result. If you're good with a glue gun, you can use one, and if you're not, you could wind up with glue on your valance, which would ruin it. So we're going to use the fusible backing on the wide part of my trim or fringe here because I do have a nice big lip there that I can use. So I'm cutting a piece of fusible backing to fit on the upper section, and then just like I did with the edge trim, just fuse down the backing across the entire piece of fringe. And then, of course, once that has cooled, you'll be able to remove the paper to expose the glue. And then we're going to use a piece of spare lining. You don't want to burn your fabric because you are ironing across the center of the valance. So once that gets positioned, you'll line it up on your adjustment marks wherever it was needed. And then you'll just put the edges around the outside. So you'll curve the outside edge underneath and then fuse that down. Now when you use the iron here, it's very important that you use the edge of the iron so you're not actually laying your iron flat for a long period of time on top of the valance. So to start it, because you want to make sure it's in the right place, you're going to go ahead and use the tip of the iron or the edge of the iron to get it started to fuse. Now this takes a while because you are fusing through some thick fabric here. So once you've gotten it started, then position your lining section over top, and then you can fuse on top of that. You can even double the lining if you'd like to make sure you don't burn your fabric, but it takes a while. The heat's got to get through there and get it nice and secured. You can continue to move it the whole time. So until it's completely fused down, you can continue to reposition. So you can take your tape measure, move along, checking it, make sure it's nice and straight before you finish. So just keep doing the double check until you get that perfect. And then once that's all secured in place, you'll be ready to hang your beautiful new valance. So just insert your curtain rod, it'll curve around the edges, and you're ready to hang your beautiful new no-sew valance. Thank you for joining me, Traceable Designers, and remember, you can always make your mark with Traceable Designer.